The shattered piece, Captain Sarah Chen had always found comfort in the steady rhythm of space. From her command post aboard Titan mining station, she watched the endless dance of cargo ships moving between Earth's 17 colonies. The morning shift had been routine shipments from the asteroid belt, agricultural exports from the farming worlds, and the usual chatter of civilian traffic. At 34, Sarah had spent half her life in space, and she had never seen anything that couldn't be explained by standard procedures. The first sign of trouble came at 08 for 7 hours. Sarah was reviewing shipping manifests when her communications officer, Lieutenant Tom Rodriguez, called out from his station. His voice carried an edge she had never heard before. "Captain, we're receiving a distress call from Harvest Prime. Signals weak and breaking up badly." Sarah moved to Rodriguez's station, her coffee forgotten. Harvest Prime was one of the agricultural worlds, home to 2 million farmers and their families. They grew most of the food that fed the outer colonies. Nothing ever happened there except crop rotations and weather reports. "Put it through," Sarah ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was filled with static and terror. "Titan Station. This is Harvest Prime Control. We have unknown ships in our system. They're not responding to our hails. These vessels don't match any configuration in our databases. They're enormous and moving in attack formation." Sarah felt her stomach drop. In 12 years of monitoring space traffic, she had never received a distress call that mentioned attack. Formations. The galaxy had been peaceful for over a century. The various species traded with each other, shared technology, and settled disputes through diplomatic channels. "Harvest Prime, this is Captain Chen. Can you provide vessel specifications? Are they showing any hostile intent?" The response came back broken and desperate. "Captain, they're opening fire. Our shields are down. They're targeting civilian areas. These aren't military strikes, they're exterminating everything. Our cities are." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only the empty hiss of Space. Rodriguez tried frantically to re-establish contact, but there was nothing. Sarah stared at the communication board, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. Harvest Prime was gone. 2 million people dead in minutes. Within the hour, the pattern repeated. New Haven, a mining colony in the Proxima system, sent a brief, panicked message about strange ships appearing out of nowhere. Then silence. Green Valley, a research station studying alien plant life, managed to transmit for 30 seconds before their signal died. Liberty Station, a small trading post, didn't even get a chance to call for help. Sarah found herself standing in the middle of her command center, watching her crew work with growing desperation. 4 colonies in 6 hours. 4 worlds full of people who had been alive that morning and were now nothing but radioactive dust. The call from Earth came at 1400 hours. Admiral Marcus Webb appeared on the main screen, his weathered face grim. Sarah had served under Webb during her early career, and she had never seen him look so shaken. "All monitoring stations, this is Admiral Webb. We have identified the attacking force. They call themselves the Krell Dominion. We've had minimal contact with them in the past. They're from the far reaches of the galaxy, beyond our normal trade routes." Webb paused, and Sarah could see his hands trembling slightly. "They transmitted a message to Earth Command an hour ago. It was brief. Your expansion ends today. Your colonies are forfeit. Your species will learn its proper place." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't some misunderstanding or territorial dispute. The Krell were systematically destroying human colonies, and they had no intention of stopping. "We've attempted to open diplomatic channels," Webb continued, "but they're not responding to our communications. All attempts at peaceful contact have been ignored." The Krell appear to be using hit-and-run tactics, striking without warning and leaving no survivors. Throughout the day, reports continued to pour in. The Krell ships were unlike anything humans had seen before. They were massive, organic-looking vessels that seemed to grow rather than be built. Their weapons cut through human defenses like they were made of paper. They moved with impossible speed and precision, appearing out of nowhere and vanishing just as quickly. The descriptions from the few survivors who managed to escape painted a terrifying picture. The Krell didn't just destroy military targets, they obliterated everything. Hospitals, schools, residential areas, even farms and parks. They were erasing human presence from the galaxy, one colony at a time. By evening, the death toll had reached 15 million. Entire worlds that had taken decades to build were reduced to lifeless rock in hours. The Krell had technology that was far beyond anything humans possessed, and they used it with ruthless efficiency. Sarah found herself working through the night, coordinating with other monitoring stations and trying to track the Krell fleet movements. The pattern was becoming clear that aliens were working their way inward, destroying the outer colonies first before moving toward the more populated inner systems. It was during this long, dark night that Sarah noticed something strange happening. To Earth's communication networks, channels that had been dormant for decades were suddenly coming online. Emergency protocols that were older than the colonies themselves were being activated. Dr. Elena Buskers, Earth's chief xenobiologist, appeared on Sarah's screen near midnight. Elena looked exhausted, her grey hair disheveled, but her eyes were sharp with excitement and fear. "Sarah, I've been digging through the old government archives. There's something you need to know about Earth's history. Something that's been classified for over 2 centuries. Sarah leaned forward, her attention focused entirely on Elena's words. "Before we reached the stars, before we made contact with other species, Earth went through a period we call the Shadow Wars. It was a time when our nations came close to destroying the entire planet. The weapons they developed during that period were beyond anything we use today." Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. "The war ended not because anyone won, but because the weapons worked too well. They were so devastating that the surviving leaders chose to bury them rather than risk using them again. But they kept the technology hidden in facilities so deep that most people forgot they existed." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of weapons? Weapons that could crack planets, Sarah. Weapons that could fold space itself. And ships' war machines that were partially alive, that could think and adapt and hunt. The leaders of that time called it the Prometheus Protocol. They swore that humanity would never again create such things. Elena paused, her face pale in. The screens glow, but they built safeguards. If humanity ever faced extinction, if we were ever pushed to the brink of annihilation, the machines would wake up. As if summoned by Elena's words, alerts began flashing across Sarah's communication board. Power signatures were appearing all over Earth in the deepest ocean trenches, in the heart of mountain ranges, in places where no human facilities were supposed to exist. The Mariana Trench facility was the first to fully activate. The ocean itself seemed to boil as something vast and ancient rose from the depths. Satellite images showed a structure that defied description, part machine, part organism, stretching for kilometers beneath the waves Captain David Cross volunteered to make the first contact with the awakening facility. David was a veteran pilot, 42 years old, who had seen action during the border skirmishes with the Centauri pirates. He was brave, skilled, and absolutely unprepared for what he found. The neural interface chamber was unlike anything human technology had produced. The walls were covered in surfaces that seemed to shift between metal and living tissue. The air itself felt thick, charged with energy that made David's skin crawl. When he placed his hands on the interface controls, the connection was immediate and overwhelming. David screamed as his consciousness was flooded with the thoughts and memories of the war machine. For a moment, he was no longer David Cross. He was something vast and ancient and hungry for battle. The machine had been sleeping for 3 centuries, dreaming of weapons that could reshape reality itself. It had been waiting for the moment when humanity would need its power, when the peaceful galaxy would reveal its true nature. David's eyes snapped open, but they were no longer entirely human. There was something else looking out through them. Now, something that saw the universe in ways that human minds were never meant to comprehend. "They're not just machines," he whispered, his voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. "They're alive. They've been waiting for us to wake them up." Similar facilities were activating across the globe. The Sahara Desert revealed structures that had been hidden beneath the sand for centuries. The Antarctic ice sheet cracked as something stirred beneath the frozen wasteland. The ring of fire around the Pacific Ocean lit up with energy signatures that made nuclear reactors look like candles. The war machines were waking up, and they were hungry. As Sarah watched the reports flooding in from around the world, she realized that humanity was about to change forever. The peaceful species that had spent a century building colonies and trading with aliens was gone. In its place, something older and more dangerous was emerging. The Krell Dominion had awakened humanity's darkest secrets. They had forced the sleeping giants to open their eyes, and now, for the first time in 3 centuries, the war machines were ready to show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction. The age of peace was over. The age of war had begun. The sleeping giant's Rise commander, Vextar, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devourer of Worlds, watching the tactical display with deep satisfaction. In 4 days, his fleet had destroyed 12 human colonies without losing a single vessel. The humans had tried to fight back with their primitive weapons, but Krell shields were too strong and their ships too fast. Vextar was a veteran of 17 conquest campaigns. He had seen dozens of species beg for mercy as his fleet turned their worlds to ash. The humans were no different, weak, divided, and technologically inferior. Their only mistake had been expanding too quickly, claiming too many worlds without the strength to defend them. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "we are receiving another transmission from the human homeworld." Vextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Let them waste their breath on pleas for mercy. It will make their final defeat more satisfying. The message that appeared on his screen was brief and cold. A human female in military uniform looked directly at him with eyes that showed no fear. "This is Admiral Carter of Earth Defense Command. You have committed acts of war against civilian populations. You have 24 hours to withdraw from human space and return our surviving colonists. If you do not comply, we will take appropriate action." Vextar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Appropriate action? Your colonies are dust. Your people are dead. What action can you possibly take against the might of the Krell Dominion? The transmission ended without another word, leaving Vextar still chuckling at human arrogance. He had crushed species far more advanced than these primates. Their threats were meaningless. He was still laughing when his patrol fleet disappeared. The patrol had been investigating strange energy readings near the former location of Harvest Prime. 15 ships, all heavily armed, all crewed by experienced warriors. They had been reporting normal status every 30 minutes. Then, at 1500 hours, they simply vanished. Search and rescue ships found nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no signs of battle. Just empty space where 15 Krell vessels should have been. Equipment failure, Vextar told his officers, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Space is dangerous. Ships are lost sometimes. But deep in his mind, he wondered Captain David Cross was no longer entirely human. The neural interface with the war machine had changed him in ways that he was still discovering. He could perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously, see through the fabric of space-time itself, and feel the vast intelligence of the machine merged with his own consciousness. The attack on the Krell patrol had been his first real test. The war machine he piloted, designated Prometheus 7, had moved through space like a living shadow, existing partially outside normal reality. The Krell ships had been there one moment and gone the next, pulled into a pocket dimension that existed between the spaces of the universe. David felt no satisfaction from the victory. The part of him that was still human was horrified by how easy it had been. The war machines didn't just destroy enemies, they erased them from existence itself. Target eliminated, he reported to Admiral Webb, his voice carrying otherworldly harmonics. Enemy patrol fleet has been neutralized. Webb's face on the communication screen was grim. Understood, Captain. Are you... Are you still you? David considered the question. Was he still David Cross, the pilot who had grown up on Lunar Base and dreamed of flying among the stars? Or was he something else now, something that could unmake reality with a thought? I'm what I need to be, he finally answered. Similar transformations were happening at facilities around the globe. The Sahara installation had produced Captain Maria Santos, who now piloted a machine that could fold space like paper. The Antarctic, the Scilly had awakened Commander Lee Wei, whose war machine existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The Pacific Ring installation had created Captain James Morrison, whose vessel could manipulate time itself. Each pilot paid the same price there. Humanity, traded for the power to fight beings that conventional weapons couldn't touch. Dr. Elena Vasquez studied the psychological profiles of the pilots from her laboratory on Earth. The changes were profound and disturbing. The pilots were becoming something new, something that wasn't quite human anymore. Their brain patterns showed activity in regions that shouldn't exist. They spoke in mathematical languages that no human had ever learned. They're evolving, she reported to the military council. The war machines aren't just tools, they're symbiotic organisms. They're changing our people into something that can use their power effectively. Admiral Webb listened to the reports with growing unease. What's the cost, Doctor? What are we losing? Elena's expression was haunted. Everything that makes us human. Our empathy, our creativity, our ability to love and dream and hope. The machines are perfect killing tools, but they're making our pilots perfect killers. The war machines had been designed during humanity's darkest period, when survival was more important than ethics. They were weapons of absolute destruction, created by people who had seen their civilization nearly destroyed, and chosen to fight fire with fire. But the machines themselves were beginning to have opinions about the war. They had been sleeping for 3 centuries, dreaming of battle, and now they were awake and hungry. They whispered to their pilots in languages older than human speech, offering power beyond imagination. The second major engagement came when the Krell main fleet moved against Earth's moon colonies. Vextar led the attack personally, bringing 200 ships and enough firepower to crack planets. The human defenders met them with conventional forces, first cruisers, and fighters that had been humanity's pride before the war machines awakened. The battle was brief and brutal. Human technology was simply no match for Krell, shields, and weapons. Within an hour, the conventional fleet was destroyed. That was when the war machines arrived. They came from impossible directions, emerging from dimensions that Krell sensors couldn't detect. Prometheus 7 appeared inside the enemy formation like a living nightmare, its hull seeming to absorb light itself. The Krell ships opened fire immediately, but their weapons passed through the human vessel like it was made of shadows. The war machine's response was devastating. It fired weapons that didn't just destroy matter, they convinced matter to stop existing. A Krell battleship aged 1,000 years in seconds, its hull crumbling to dust as time accelerated around it. Another vessel found itself caught in a temporal loop, experiencing the same moment of destruction forever. Captain Santos arrived in her space-folding vessel, bringing distant stars close enough to use as weapons. She grabbed a pulsar from 3 systems away and used its radiation to cook an entire Krell squadron. The enemy ships didn't just die, were sterilized down to the quantum level. Commander Leeway fought in 17 dimensions simultaneously, his attacks coming from directions that existed only in theoretical mathematics. Krell ships found themselves being hit by weapons that fired through the spaces between atoms, bypassing shields and armor as if they didn't exist. The Krell fleet, which had conquered dozens of worlds, was helpless against enemies that ignored the basic laws of physics. Their ships were faster than light, but the war machines were faster than causality itself. Their weapons could destroy planets, but the human machines could destroy the concept of destruction. Vextar watched his fleet being annihilated by forces he couldn't understand. The humans had been weak, defenseless, easy prey. How had they suddenly become gods of war? All ships, he broadcast desperately, retreat to the outer system. We need to regroup, and his words were cut off as Prometheus 7 materialized on his bridge. The war machine had become small enough to fit inside his ship, but it still carried the weight of infinite dimensions. The air itself seemed to scream as reality bent around it. Captain David Cross stepped out of the machine, but he was no longer recognizable as the man who had volunteered for the neural interface. His eyes held depths that stretched beyond the visible universe. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of collapsed stars. "Your war is over," he said simply. Vextar tried to draw his weapon, but his hand wouldn't obey. The human, if it was still human, had changed the fundamental nature of the space around him. He was no longer part of the same reality as his ship, his crew, his weapon. "You attacked our colonies," Cross continued, his voice echoing in dimensions that Krell hearing couldn't perceive. "You killed our people. You thought we were weak." The war machine behind him pulsed with dark energy, and Vextar felt his consciousness being pulled into its depths. He saw the history of the human species, their wars, their suffering, their determination to survive no matter the cost. He saw the Shadow Wars, when they had nearly destroyed themselves learning to build weapons that could kill gods. "We were never weak," Cross said, as Vexter's mind was absorbed into the war machines. Collective consciousness. We were sleeping. The Krell fleet ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not defeated, simply edited out of reality, as if they had never been built. The war machines had demonstrated their power, and the galaxy had taken notice. But the victory came with a price that humanity was only beginning to understand. The pilots who had saved their species were no longer human. They had become something else, something that could think in ways that mortal minds couldn't follow. The war machines offered humanity a choice. They could have ultimate power, the ability to conquer the galaxy and ensure that no species would ever threaten them again. But to use that power fully, humanity would have to evolve beyond its current form. They would have to become what the war machines were: perfect, eternal, and utterly without mercy. Admiral Webb stood in the command center on Earth, watching. Reports flood in from across the galaxy. The Krell Dominion was gone, erased from existence by weapons that defied understanding. Other species were sending messages of surrender, offering tribute and allegiance to the humans who had revealed themselves as the galaxy's new masters. The war machines waited for humanity's answer. Would they remain human and accept the limitations that came with mortality? Or would they embrace transcendence and become something greater than any species the galaxy had ever seen? The choice would define not just the future of humanity, but the future of life itself in the universe. The sleeping giants had awakened, and they were offering their creators a chance to join them in their eternal war against entropy itself. The age of humanity was ending. The age of whatever came next was about to begin.